All right, so Jorge asked how that conversation went, and it didn't go too far, but it does offer an opportunity to talk about some tactics. Now, I want to share with you guys probably the most useful apologetic tactic that I've encountered. I learned this from Greg Koukl, and you can read about it in his highly recommended Tactics for Defending Your Faith, Greg Koukl. And it's called the Columbo Tactic. Put simply, the Columbo Tactic is 2 questions that you can ask after anybody makes a claim or challenges your faith or says really anything. And it's patterned after the old TV detective Columbo, who was, his shtick was, he'd always put on like he's bumbling and disheveled and a little bit clueless, but that unassuming manner that he affected with the witness on the stand or the guy in the criminal in the interrogation room was actually quite brilliant. Oh, there's something I don't understand. I can't do a Columbo impression. But he would, the 2 questions are, what do you mean by that? The second question is, well, how did you come to that conclusion? And the genius of these 2 questions are, they make somebody clarify their position. And then it makes them defend it. The what do you mean by that? They have to focus and make clear what it is they're trying to say. And how did you come to that conclusion makes them defend it. Because it's easy for people to make some sideways claim. It's harder for them to give reasons for why they believe it. And this tactic can protect you, as it did me when I was having this conversation with Brian. So he asks me, what's the blood of the Lamb? Now, that's kind of a hard question. I think that's why Jorge wanted to hear what I had to say about it. It's a hard question because, do we as Christians even know? What is the blood of the Lamb? Why is Jesus called the blood of the Lamb? And the second thing that's a challenge is it's really dealing in concepts that are really bizarre and out in left field for your average everyday American person. So after I recovered from the astonishment of Brian's question, I answered it as best I could in the moment. Like, well, Brian, back in the olden days, before Jesus was born, back in the Moses times and the Abraham times and all the Jewish patriarchs, God gave the ancient Israelites a law. And if they broke the law, the penalty was death. But the way that God was merciful or lenient to the Israelites was, instead of them dying, they could sacrifice one of their lambs. So the innocent lamb would die in their place, and that would hold off God's anger when they broke the law. And that would only work for so long. Well, the way that Jesus is the Lamb is, in the bigger sense, we are all guilty before God. So the big picture, Jesus had to die for all of mankind. So Jesus was big picture innocent. We are all big picture guilty. So in the big picture, Jesus was the sacrificial lamb who died in our place to restore us to God. So I said that, and you know, when I'm talking about religion with non-believers, I really try to avoid the Christianese and the high concepts and all of that. But the blood of the Lamb, what are you going to say? I'm just trying to explain it. And Brian comes back and he says, well, that's irrational. So, rather than panic or get angry or anything like that, I employed Greg Koukl's Columbo Tactic. Okay, Brian, what do you mean it's irrational? Well, it doesn't make any sense. It's not logical. Why would God do that? Yada, yada, yada. And I come back and I say, well, why irrational? Why is it irrational, Brian? Now, when I ask those questions, I'm putting the burden back on Brian. And I'm doing it in as friendly a way as I can. I'm not attacking him or telling him he's wrong or he's stupid. But why irrational, Brian? And he really couldn't defend what he is, so I kind of got him out of the hot seat. And I said, Brian, if it doesn't make sense to you, I kind of don't even blame you. I said, these are very specific Judeo-Christian concepts. I said, but I wouldn't call them irrational. I might call them non-rational, but I wouldn't call them irrational. And if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. So we talked a little bit about how it just kind of makes sense that we're guilty, doesn't it? And it makes sense that we're separated from God. And the conversation didn't go much farther than that. But it opened the door for more conversations. He and I had a bunch of neat conversations that maybe I'll have a chance to tell you by and by. But remember that, the Columbo Tactic. So I went from being in the hot seat about the blood of the Lamb. Oh, that doesn't make any sense, Jake. To now, he has to kind of admit that, maybe it's not irrational, but it doesn't make any sense to me. And then we can move on from there.